For a lot of us, you've been around the block a couple times. I know that LexisNexis isn't necessarily one that you maybe haven't not heard of, right? That's the thing. So you've most likely heard of it, right? So here's what they're going to monitor. They're going to monitor something called a clue report, right? The clue report is something that insurance companies are going to use both at a for residential and for auto to see how they're going to price you based off of the risk that you are or that you seem. So essentially what they do is if you've been arrested, if you've been in a car accident, if you something happened in your house, hurricane, like whatever that is, anything that's attached to your name, your shingle came off, like whatever it is, that's going to get attached to that clue report. Super important to know because this is what they're using to underwrite a lot of us, right? Really, all of us. They're also going to take a look at, this is when we start going more into the business side, business associations. So names of the businesses and where you're an officer in those businesses, as well as your title in those businesses. This is why, similar to, I'm not a big fan of co-signing for someone. Like, I'm a parent now. So I know that I'm going to have my opportunity to show my kids about credit if that system is still around, right? But if the system is still around, I'm going to pretty much help them out the same way that my parents helped me, right? Helping me out with some of the AUs, authorized users, helping them out if they need a co-signer to maybe get themselves into a real estate loan. They want to get into some real estate investing or to get their primary house, maybe co-signing on behalf of them so they can get their first vehicle. Like, we're parents. We get it. And for those of us that maybe siblings, parents did it for us, we're doing it for our brother or sister, people that we trust. But here's the caveat behind that. And here's why I add that in there, comma, right? I add that in there because sometimes it ends up biting us in the butt when we co-sign for people that don't end up paying for the debt. We've seen it. Some of our own parents have done it to us. Some of our cousins have done it. Maybe we've done it to people unintentionally. We were down and out. I'm not here to judge. But I say that because you also want to be careful of who you go into business with. Because the business associations that you have, so let's say if your cousin or your ex was maybe the owner of the first entity. So let's say you guys started maybe a Turo business together. Hey, let's do an LLC. We'll go 50-50 on the ownership. They're maybe the owner and maybe you're the president or maybe you're the CFO, like whatever it is that your title is in that business, that stuff is getting stored by LexisNexis. Super important to know. Real estate transactions and ownership data. I've talked about this before on podcasts. This was actually a really big soundbite, but I'll say on here again. So whenever you have like a foreclosure or if you have an eviction that's been reported before, most likely they're gathering that data from LexisNexis. That's also gathering that data from public record. A lot of people don't know that. But again, if you follow me or Rad for some time, you definitely know that. Records, so this is liens, judgments, bankruptcies, all by LexisNexis. Professional licenses, previous addresses, that goes for business and personal, by the way. So they're capturing both of those. Phone records, so this goes for work, business, and personal. Background checks, again, if we've been arrested, if we had a DUI, like whatever it is, not here to judge, just telling you what they're monitoring, public record information. This is also used to determine child support collections and enforce that. So they've teamed up with SageStream. So there was like a merger there. And so whatever information the SageStream algorithm had, they also have it now inside of LexisNexis, which if you're wondering, before I go to this one, if you're wondering, the same way that you can dispute with the Chex system, same way that you can dispute, which by the way, I forgot to mention on here, it lasts up to 5 years when you're in the Chex system. And then from there, it's like the statute of limitations, it comes off. But you can, the same way that you can pull a report for EWS, the same way that you can pull a report for ChexSystems is the same way that you can pull a report for LexisNexis. Remember, you're entitled to one free one every 12 months. You can dispute that information and get anything on it that's either dated or just erroneous, right? It shouldn't even be there to begin with or just dated. Like, let's say you were arrested at 18, whatever. I'm giving you like a crazy example. At 18, that was supposed to be expunged or come off of your record, but it's still there. You have the documentation to send that out. Like, hey, dude, like this is holding me back from getting access to some funding. This is holding me back from being able to work with certain lenders that they're looking at me like high risk. You're going to want to get that removed. And so you're going to do that by obviously going below the surface of just looking at your credit reports, but taking a look at these secondary bureaus and these data furnishing companies as well. Telecheck, they are monitoring the transactions that you do in your business. And they're monitoring the checks that you write as well. And so if you've been writing checks that have been bouncing, or if you've been writing checks that maybe, I don't know, you wrote a check, it was, let's say, for $5K, and now your bank is at like $50, and it's like always like you're constantly hurting your bank rating. Remember what we spoke about last week? It's constantly bringing down your bank rating. Those little data points are getting sent back over to Telecheck. So they're monitoring the strength of the payments that you're making as a personal and as business, and they're also monitoring the checks that you're writing. And so this all ties back into, again, your bank rating, and it also ties into how they're grading you as an individual and how they're grading you, your business. Now, clean up this information, which is essentially the same way that we've kind of been talking about all up to this point. Pull a copy of any of these reports that's holding you back. You want to dispute any or all of this information that's, again, erroneous, incorrect, or just dated. Shouldn't be on there to begin with. You want to contact the bank and or the original creditor to have the information updated as well. So that's like a side step, like a little side bubble or like a side thought. You can also contact the bank or the creditor directly and say, hey, I don't owe you guys anything. Why is it still reporting? Right? So that's like a little side step that you can do. So that way they can then furnish that information over to LexisNexis, over to the Chex system. And that way you can kind of come out of that system. You can also pay the original or negotiated balances to have it removed. Sometimes banks, I've done it with Amex, they wouldn't negotiate in order to come out of jail. I had to pay the full amount that I owed when I went to collections with them, right? I had to do what I had to do to get back into the system. I had to do what I had to do to come out of Chex. One of the ways that I did it was by paying for it, right? If that information was wrong, and let's say, hey, I don't owe you guys anything, I already paid $1,500, it's still reporting. Obviously, at that point, I would bring it up to LexisNexis. Obviously, at that point, I would bring it up to the bank, tell them, hey, I already paid for this. Because at that point, it's not fraudulent. At that point, it's factual, right? That's factual disputing. You can also wait for the record to drop. A little sidebar on that is that takes up to 5 years. But in the meantime, you guys can also check out second chance banks and fintech companies. Are you guys familiar with second chance banks? Let me know in the comments. And I'm sure a lot of us are, because a lot of us have messed around with banks like Chime. When you have everything else on the back end that people aren't talking about dialed in, it makes, once you go to apply for the sequences that I'm going to give you, it's just going to, the funding is going to fly onto your file. And so that's why I'm setting it up the way that I am, because it's far more important when you have the actual mechanics versus just the flash in the pan. So with second chance banking, here's essentially what it is, man. You're able to work with banks that aren't going to grade you or grade against you in order to approve you to get you into the door. Meaning, if Bank of America, as an example, is determining when you're applying, you're putting your social on the application, hey, I want to open up a checking account with you guys. Okay, cool. Apply right here, whatever it is, right? Let's say they take a look at the Chex system and they see that, oops, let's say they had, you had 2 accounts that you didn't even know about. They pulled it up on the EWS. They pulled it up on the Chex system. Oh, I didn't even know that I owed money with Wells Fargo or Chase. I didn't even know that. They say, well, guess what? We can't approve you here, right? Now, obviously, they won't tell you that right there. They'll just say, hey, you weren't approved. And so second chance banking, they look past the Chex system, meaning you're going to get a second chance to get yourself in the door so you can start getting some positive reporting back into that system. And so with the banks that I'm going to give you right now, this is going to be a nice side entry if you've been victim to that. And I say victim loosely, right? If you fell victim to being in part of the Chex system, you just didn't know what you didn't know. This is going to be some side steps that you can take so you can start building that back out. So here are some 7 second chance banks and fintech companies that I want you guys to check out. We're not holding
drop them gems. Drop them gems. Here we go. Here you go, Bank. Jerry. Here you go, bro.
ASOS Bank is going to be the first one. I say ASOS. Some people say Axos. I say ASOS. So ASOS Bank is going to be the first one. Second one is going to be Current. That's going to be Current Bank. Third one is going to be Woodforest National Bank. You guys know, you guys are smart.
Yeah, Woodforest is out in Ohio, bro.
Everyone's out in Ohio, bro.
I know, bro. All the good people from Ohio,
everyone's out, bro. Ohio and Pennsylvania has like all the banks in the DMV area. I don't have anyone out here in Florida. It sucks.
I know, man. I know. You got
Woodforest. You guys are smart. a quick Google search, right? Lets you know, okay, let me see. Okay, let me pull up Google or let me pull up Woodforest National Bank. Let me go on their website. Let me see if they service my area. If not, at this point, we're kind of stepping away from the SBA side. This would be something that you may want to start taking a look at, some geographical sidesteps with some foreign entities, which I'm gonna be touching on here in the session today. But now we can start playing around with some geographic location or restriction sidesteps, right? Chime, not the biggest fan of Chime, but it is a good starter account for you to start getting some deposits in. You just got a job. You're finally starting to get some income coming in, or you have some income coming in. You don't want the mattress savings anymore. You're trying to get your foot back into the check system. Somebody that kind of starts reporting a little bit. I like Chime for what it is. It's just a nice account to have, right? But we all know what Chime did during stimulus checks. For those of us that got stimulus checks, those stimulus checks weren't hitting Chime accounts. They were bouncing back, and they were going back into pretty much the government fund. And a lot of people were waiting like, "Oh, you know about that or no?"
No, I didn't know. I didn't know about that.
I had to make like 5 YouTube videos on it.
Oh, that's brutal, man.
So yeah. So Chime was one of those banks, but you know, for what they are, like I said, I have them on the list for what they are, just because they're so easy to get into. So Chime is one of them. I'm sure that the majority of us are looking at second chance banking. This is usually the one that pops up like at the top of our radar. You probably didn't even know this, but Chase, you can also do like a little sidestep with Chase. Do they look at the early warning system? Yes. Do they look at checks? Yes, but they also look past that. One of the ways that you can get past that with them, really simple, is sometimes they just may require a little bit more down in your account. So let's say if to open an example, because they're always moving it, but let's say if to open an account and you have like stellar checks system, you've never been like a negative in the EWS system, it's like, hey, $25 to open up a personal account, right? But when you have, let's say you're coming out of, let's say the check system, sometimes they'll say, hey, in order for you to open an account with us, we need at least 300 in the account, or we need at least 500 in the account. Or if it's a new business, hey, we need at least 2,500 in the account. And you can't let that, amount drop for a 24-hour period, as an example. That would be kind of like a sidestep that you could do with Chase. Again, it's going to vary by everyone, but I just don't want you to be surprised if you go there and they tell you something like that. Next one is Ameris Bank. We actually got them out here in Florida. I don't know if you guys got them out there in Ohio, but we got Ameris Bank out here in Florida. That's another one that I want you guys to check out. Bank United is another one that we got out here in Florida. I think I've seen them in Georgia. Don't quote me on that, but I think I've seen them in Georgia. What was that?
I've seen Bank United before. Yeah.